We are gonna be famous one day, but we're not famous yet. And we realized that one of the things we probably need to do is have a better idea of who might be out there listening for information on culture and history and the doings of ladies and gentlemen together and such. So we figured since we women of a certain age, it's been a long time since we were sort of thinking about some of these things, and we needed some help. So tonight we have a very special guest, one of my former students, and she is here to tell us all of the wise things that she has learned from scouring the internet for what kids are up to these days. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Okay. This is gonna be so great. Our guest tonight, our very special guest tonight, is Evita Duffy, and I have to tell you a little history about how I know Evita. First, and most importantly, she is a published poet. No, this is really important. It's like because we are here in the Mosaic Ark, where we sail around from the Dragon Common Room as our port, and Evita was one of my students in the class that writing Christian poetry came out of, and so that's enough for me. Like, thank you so much for coming. She has this is truly Evita's like high level snaps. Is she wrote poetry with me already? Yes.
It's true. It was an amazing experience.
And I took all of the things that we learned how to do in the Telegram chat. Casey was there at the very beginning, right? So Casey,
Oh, yeah.
you and Evita need to bond now, because I put both of you through the same drills.
Well, when I started writing with you, I didn't know you were going to publish it, and then you.
Neither did Evita. Well, no, that's not true.
Oh, I'm going to publish this now. I went, okay. How do you want your name?
Yes, that's me. It's like we have established that I am definitely Barbie because you're coming to the dance, right? And here you are. So no, but this is I was doing my little sort of backstory thinking about it. It's like I actually, Casey, you and Evita are now going to have to fight it out for who actually met me first, because Evita. I mean, this is all like in the deep back history of COVID times, right? And Evita,
Yeah.
do you remember that you came to my attention because of a little furore on campus, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Over a sign, right?
Yes.
Should we tell them about the sign just so everybody understands like how cool it is that you're here with us on the Mosaic Ark?
Yeah. Do you want me to tell the story?
Tell us about how I knew to write to you and said we have to talk.
Yes. No, honestly, I tell the story all the time. It's one of my most formative experiences. It really is. I had this, participated in this event with the U Chicago's Institute of Politics, which is basically a replica of Harvard's Institute of Politics. But they had this thing where they had all students from different political perspectives stand up with a sign and have their picture taken for U Chicago social media, where they said, "I vote because," and then you write why you voted. So some people were like, "I vote because abortion is healthcare. I vote because kids shouldn't be put in cages," right? Because people were saying Trump was putting illegal migrants in cages. And then I said, "I vote because the coronavirus won't destroy America, but socialism will." And I got and this was in the beginning of COVID. So there actually hadn't been that many deaths. We didn't really know what it was. There was a lot of fear mongering. The world had not shut down yet, but people were like a little bit on edge. And I was like, no, the real thing that's going to kill us is basically socialism or totalitarianism. And I got so much hate online. Like the U Chicago students like jumped down my throat. Like people were calling me like, just a xenophobe, a racist, like any phobic.
You guys are getting the idea here why Evita and I had to be friends.
Right. So they threw that at me, and I had a lot of people reach out to me, but the best person who reached out to me was Professor Fulton Brown. She just said, "You're so brave, and if you need a friend while you're getting all this hate, come see me during office hours." And of course, the world shut. Couldn't go see her during office hours. But it was really somebody who reached out to me in a time where I felt like I had no friends and no support, and it was really awesome. And so then after that, I took her class on Tolkien and read The Lord of the Rings for the first time, and it was like the best thing that could have happened out of a really horrible situation.
It's the gift,
Lovely.
right? The gift of these, like if you can find the thing that we're being shown to do. And it was lovely because I saw the coverage that was happening about, your posts and everything. And I think maybe I saw you did an op-ed for the Maroon. And I'm
I did an op-ed afterward.
Oh my gosh, I know where she is, right? I hadn't met you before. It was your second year in the college.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I must write to you. So, and then the university shut down. And so you went home. And so I was thinking, it's like, we did Tolkien, but it was my Tolkien COVID edition, right?
Yeah.
Sauron's Ring edition of the class, which was all online, right? So, like here we meet online again, but it's like our first regular meetings were in that. I'm trying to figure out how to play music and do slides and everything, because it was so weird to have to teach.
Yeah, and can I just say that there were so many professors who were completely incapable of dealing with this like virtual learning experience. And Professor Fulton Brown, you were the only person that even like remotely attempted to make it work, and you did such a good job because you'd had like intro music playing, you had slides, you didn't like mess it up. Like she was the only professor who could figure out Zoom, literally the only one. You should really take that as a testament to your technical abilities, Professor Fulton Brown.
See, guys, I do have tech. It's like all the unauthorized guys are going, yeah, we know. She's no, but it was great because I was like, everybody was sad. And the last thing I was going to let you all be in that moment was sad when we were going to go through the story that was going to show us what was happening, which was Sauron's trying to scare us. And you understood that. I mean, you'd understood that even before the lockdown started, that this was fear mongering, right? So we weren't going to do that. And then when we came back and we got to be on campus, but when we were doing the poetry class, right, it was still in the time where we had to pretend to wear masks in class. Like as everybody had to wear masks on campus, and you also in that the year before. We did the poetry class. You and your friends had started the Thinker on campus, right? And I remember watching the things that you said about what it was like trying to just do class in the midst of the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and the masking and it's like I feel like we have war stories being in the trenches together.
Yeah, and U Chicago was particularly bad. Like I mean, if you were a freshman on campus, in the dorms, like the freshmen weren't allowed to visit each other in dorms. Like they said, you isolate alone. You'd go to class and like we all had to be like in like far apart. That was when we were in class. We were remote for a super long time,
right.
Masking, and some people couldn't read lips. Like one of our friends, Declan Hurley, like he has, you know, some hearing issues. Like it was a lot. It was just a lot of horrible things that happened during COVID. And so we started the Thinker, and we started talking about all of the horrible things that were happening to students and talking about how anti-science they were. Like one of them was they shut down the gyms, which of course exercising is so good to protect yourself from any disease, but especially COVID. And you were sort of our faculty advisor. We weren't an official RSO, a student organization, because we knew that they wouldn't approve us. So we were independent of the university, but Professor Fulton Brown was our advisor, you know, like our unofficial official advisor to the Thinker.
Well, it was my honor. And I was just like, and I kept telling you all, it's like, you guys are in it this year. This is so important. And indeed, it's like one of the things that Declan and Chad Burkich and Chris Phillips have in our prayer group that we continued. I started it last year for the corona testing control group. Like when they were still going to have all of us who weren't vaccinated do testing, and we're like, okay, fine, we'll pray, right? We'll be there praying, and we've kept it going for the last 2 years. As much to say, now everybody's forgotten. It's like you could have no clue whatsoever that any of what we've just described ever happened. It's surreal.
Evita just described prison.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, the freshmen in their dorms not being able to leave. You're not allowed, you know, sunshine. What in Britain it was like an hour a day. What in the yard?
Yeah.
You know.
It was so, and like now it's coming back to me because I haven't thought about it in a while. So it really is, it's like flashbacks. They had a sign, a document that said, if you observe your friends or your professors breaking COVID rules, you promise to report them to the COVID system. Like it was so commie. It was crazy. Or then you had the vaccine and booster mandates. We had friends who were vaccine injured that then had to take the booster against the recommendations of their doctors. I mean, so many, and we had a friend who didn't go to U Chicago, but we did report on this in the Thinker. She got vaccinated. She was supposed to take the booster. Her doctor said, you shouldn't take the booster. They said, you have to, otherwise you'll be expelled. And she said, I can't. And they expelled her. I mean, like crazy. And she got on Tucker Carlson and ended up going to a different school. But I mean, the stories from that time were just like, I didn't even think, I couldn't even have imagined something like this would happen before I entered the university.
This is East Germany stuff. That's absolutely crazy. Just like the worst of the worst of, you know, surveillance state where I think probably literally one half of the population was spying on the other officially for the state. It's just insane. Well, it's not insane, is it? It's evil. It's different. It was evil.
Oh yeah, and just mentioning Declan, that I did a class on campus the spring of 2021 on virtue, and it was 8 people in the class, but because they were wanting everybody to spread out so much, we were in a lecture hall that usually seats like 120. And so I'm in this basically empty room with 8 people, and Declan, who, as you say, you know, has hearing issues. And so I was, you know, speaking, I took my mask off so he could hear, and I got reported by somebody who saw into the room, right? So you're just like, what? And Declan actually, he wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal talking about this difficulty. It's like, you know, you say that you're, you know, accessible. What about accessibility to people who can't hear under these? Yeah. So it's all astonishingly strange. Anyway, therefore, Evita comes to us reporting from the front, having been on the front lines in a lot of these moments. And I've been really happy that you graduated 2 years ago. It doesn't feel like 2 years ago. It feels like yesterday. That, you know, we're still in conversation, and you have now been reporting the last 2 years for the Federalist, right? You writing.
Yes, but I'm a contributor there, and I just left, and now I'm working for Dan Bongino, the Dan Bongino Show. I'm a producer there, and I'm going to be starting a new show on May 6th with just myself in the morning. We're calling it the Morning Edition. So I'm doing a few things, but still writing.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, so you came with some topics that you wanted us to think about, and it's like I'm not sure who's going to help who more, right? Can you tell us what's going on out there?
Yeah,
and
we need help.
Yeah, we need help, and also that I know you're also a regular sailor with the Ark. That some of the things we wanted to talk about are we're very interested in the courtship world, because we want grandchildren. Yeah. I mean, just like flat out, I'm bluntly there, right? Need more babies in the world, and therefore very interested in, of course, the relationships between men and women, and particularly the 18 to 30s, right? But then also thinking more broadly about like what's going on in the culture. So we're going to go there, but it's like, where should we start? I think you had a poll that you wanted us to look at. Yeah, there was a
that poll is a great thing to start with. It kind of just shows how Gen Z men and women are going in very different ideological directions, and it's causing a lot of trouble in the dating world. I don't know if people can see the poll yet.
Yeah, so I've got the gender crossed with age, ideological differences, but it seems like it was a fairly interesting survey that they did. I'm not familiar with Change Research. Can you tell us about who they are, and have you studied their
so I don't know about Change Research specifically. Okay. I saw the one that you sent with Pew, but I mean there's been multiple studies done. Like it's a pretty wide. Like there's a pretty wide consensus that they're not agreeing on politics. And it's actually, it's interesting because they, there's always sort of women tend to lean a little more left than men across all ages. I mean, this is like pretty standard, but what's interesting is the difference between like the younger generations appears to be much more wide. The gap seems to be much more than in the older generations. They start to kind of come closer together.
Yeah, well, this is just the young women are more liberal than young men, as they titled it, and they talked to, this was about 6 months ago, and they talked to about 1,000 people, 18 to 34, and found, I mean, on the chart that I'm showing now, right? So yeah, the female 65 and plus and the male 65 and plus almost track exactly. It's like 41% of both are conservative. Okay, great, right? And then it looks like with the female in our age group, Casey, the women are 34% conservative and the men are 38% conservative. So we might have a few more conservative men around, but
almost even as well.
Yeah, a little bit, but it tracks. Yeah, the biggest difference they get to 35 to 49, the women are 20% conservative and the men 28, and it's getting more blue as you go this way, right? But as you say, Evita, that your age group, the 18 to 34, it's striking.
Well, why this is happening, I have some theories. If we
want to do why.
I'd like to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things going on. There was an op-ed in the Federalist 3 days ago, where kind of theorized, and I agree with this, about why young women are sort of drawn to leftism. And I think that this is true. There's a lot of single young women, and I think it's really inherent for young women to desire support and protection. Like, unfortunately, there are gender differences. I think men tend to be, especially young men, much more independent than young women. And so when they're out on their own in the world and they're not home with their mom and dad and they don't have a husband, they are very drawn to someone filling in that gap. And oftentimes that tends to be the state. That's where economic policy comes in, where they tend to think, okay, I want to help people who can't fend for themselves in the world, right? That's where like you see people, women really carrying programs, social issues. And then, on the male side of things, and there's also something to be said about young men having daddy issues. A lot of young women are not growing up with fathers. And so having somebody replace that in their lives is really important. We always talk about how not having fathers affects men, but it also has a big impact on women and the way that they view the world and what they value. Women also, the left really plays into their good intentions, right? Like wanting to care for people who might be marginalized in society. And so if you tell them, oh, women are marginalized or Black people are marginalized, they're going to want to protect those people. This is a good impulse that they have, but it's oftentimes exploited. And then on the right, you have men who are feeling really, really, I think, just put down by society. I mean, if you're an outgoing male in middle school, you're put on Ritalin, right? I mean, you're put down in the classroom all the time. And so I think telling men that their masculinity is toxic has made them go in the opposite direction and say, no, who can I go to that's going to tell me my masculinity is a good thing? Where am I going to be valued? And of course, that's with the red pill movement and the manosphere on the internet. And so they are trending in the opposite direction because of how put down they are in society. So those are my kind of broad theories about the two of them.
Well, I agree completely. No, and I wanted to be like even more particular. Go ahead, Casey.
No, I was going to say I agree as well. It's because young women in particular of a certain age are very maternal. I mean, we're always maternal, but when you're very young, you're maternal and looking to make that a reality. Whether these women realize it or not, subconsciously, that's probably part of what's driving them towards what you would call leftist causes, right? Which is really just you want to take care of people. You want to make sure the state takes care of people because the state's daddy, right?
Right.
Again, at least subconsciously. I mean, I would, if I were a young woman and if I were leaning that way, which I didn't when I was in my 20s, but if I did and somebody suggested that to me, I would just retch. That would just be grotesque. Right?
Which would be grotesque of the state?
It would be grotesque if somebody suggests to me that I'm looking towards the state as daddy, right? I would find that absolutely repulsive, which is why nobody on the left says it, but they're probably all thinking it, that are using these masses of young women to vote their way on particular issues. They're pulling at their heartstrings. They're using emotional triggers to do that. And I think they're more susceptible to that than men are in general. But I just think things have gotten, over the past 25 years, things have gotten more, more on a personal level with politics, where people will take everything personally. But
that's because they're all the women involved.
They've been involved for 100 years, though.
Yeah, but that's
a big difference.
Yeah, I was realizing this is an entirely appropriate theme for us to carry on from my original, so Evita got all of the attention for her whiteboard post about COVID and socialism. I did mine back in the dark ages on 3 Cheers for White Men.
Yes, I remember that.
It's a great article. I love it.
And it's still right. Although, but there were 3 elements that I was cheering for. One, that marriage is constituted by consent, which I still think is really important. But I have also studied the way in which consent has been corrupted, which is, I think some of the ways that marriage has been redefined in the last decades has anchored on that idea of consent. So, good things that can be corrupted are out there. Yeah. The second was, or no, that was which one? First or second? Anyway, chivalry, right? Which we're going to talk about more, right? The thing that the men are actually the good impulses that they have of being masculine and heroic and things like that. But my third cheer was women's voting, and I'm sorry to say I'm changing my mind.
Me too. I said this. The world would be a better place if women didn't vote. I'm so sorry, but it's true.
I'll be the outlier. I don't agree.
Oh, good. Let's talk about it. Let's vote. Evita and I vote against it. Wait.
Let's vote.
No, okay. Well, let me clarify before I get clipped and then somebody cancels me, because I'm not trying to say women shouldn't vote, but I will say if you look at how women vote, it is responsible for a lot of problems in our country. And so I think I don't know if the answer is maybe to have people in the women be raised, but I mean that's probably the answer, but it's a tough one to figure out. But I just, they are voting terribly, and we have disintegrated as a country since they did get the right to vote. And I'm so sorry. I mean, the 19th Amendment has not done a lot of good things for our country.
Well, when do you think the disintegration? Well, what decade do you think that the disintegration started?
1920.
Well, if yeah, I mean, but
that's an easy.
No, I want to bite this out. Let's talk about it.
You told me the Enlightenment, so now you're pushing the timeline up.
Oh no, Evita's right. It's the Enlightenment.
It's the Enlightenment, yeah.
Mary Wollstonecraft. But I think the actual right to vote transforms it politically. But shall we unpack it? So, go ahead, Casey. Make the case that it's a good thing that we have the right to vote.
Well, you should have a say in how your country is run. And as far as making bad decisions, raise people better, men and women. I was not burdened with being a liberal in my 20s. So
well, there you go.
I was disabused of that very young. It's something I figured out on my own. But I mean, I would never use myself as an example and say, well, because I voted right. I know people vote badly. I know lots of women who vote badly and for very emotional and completely irrational reasons. It's probably quite a few men that do that too. Just because it's more in a woman's nature to be more emotional doesn't mean that men would automatically make the opposite decisions because they're more rational. Some men are just dumb, just vote wrong because they're dumb, but you have to give people a say in what's being done with their safety, with their security, with their finances, with their future. Otherwise, it's just a dictatorship, and you're at the mercy of whether or not you have a good dictator.
Okay.
That's my case.
Is that your case?
That's my case.
I will proceed to demolish it. And then Evita can judge. No. Okay. So shall I? I think women actually vote completely rationally for their own interests, which are bad for the country. And therefore, I'm not saying that women tend to, emotionally, men and women both vote emotionally. And I think one of the things we wanted to think about was the TikTok videos about Baldwin. That's totally emotional. So I'm not going to say men are more or less emotional than the women. But as Evita was saying, women's emotions are geared toward caring for, well, toddlers mainly, right? It's like I've made that argument before. If you look at what human beings need to survive into like by the time they hit the age of reason at 7 or 8, you have to have women caring for them in a very, very intensive way. And women, I think toxic femininity is defaulting to the premise that all of society should be run like a kindergarten. I
do see a lot of women acting like that. I find it quite repulsive.
Right, but that's rational for women to do because it's rational. It makes it makes good sense to take care of toddlers in a way that protects them. Right,
but it's irrational to look at as a country full of adults as if they were toddlers. That's just being a control freak.
Right, correct.
That's an emotional problem on her part. This fictional woman we're talking about.
She's not fictional. She's like every woman out there.
She's fictional. She's, an amalgam, right? Right. This amalgamation we're talking about, this monster.
Well, it's called the voting public, right? And so,
well, not all of us, though. But
I don't care. So this is. I do find this amusing as a problem because it's like I'm not sure I want my right to vote taken away because my husband and I would not vote the same way, but he can't vote anyway because he's not a citizen. So there. He's going in and out the door over there. But no, the thing is, I'd say Evita's right that I've said it's the Enlightenment because the arguments for women's participation in the citizenry are exactly coeval with the arguments for men's participation in this history. That the French Revolution and, well, the American Revolution they don't worry about women's voting, as far as I know, in those discussions. But the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, it makes, you know, all the men are the citizens and they all get to participate. And immediately in France, there's arguments by Olympe de Gouges to say, well, women should have a right, you know, the Declaration of Rights of Women, which she also included a sort of sample marriage contract at the end. So she redefined what it is that constitutes marriage. And it fits with where France went. It's sort of, you know, laic and legal and things like that. So it's the fiction that, women never had the right to vote and men only ever had the right to vote. That's a kind of illusion of modernity.
Right, that's not true. Only some men had the right to vote, not all of them.
Right, and the who had the right to vote, voting is an exercise basically of, quite literally, the bourgeoisie in cities. The sort of town governments are these representative governments. That's the only place in the, you know, the development of European government that you had voting, obviously. Mm-hmm. Right, you don't vote for the king. So, although the towns do by way of supporting him, right, and things like that, right? So this whole the Enlightenment claim that, you know, we need to be represented in order for our government to be run properly. It can go in a lot of different directions in terms of how do you think people make good decisions? I feel like I've lost the thread.
Well, it presumes that good decisions are going to be made because women aren't involved in making them, which doesn't seem logical to me.
Okay.
My question is, like, it's kind of a chicken or the egg question, right? Like, are women voting poorly because they have the right to vote because of the circumstances, the cultural circumstances that created that? Or is the culture bad and therefore women are voting bad? I'm not sure what's created this situation. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'd like to think that it's a terrible culture that's feeding off of, you know, and exploiting women's good intentions, and that's why they're voting so poorly. But then I do understand there could be an argument to be made that the only reason why they have a right to vote is because of the culture, and there would be no reason for them to vote unless, you know, we had these cultural forces that are, you know, really actually founded and rooted in Marxism that are, you know, creating the circumstances for. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I don't know. I frankly, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what's the reason for why they're voting so poorly.
Well, I think they're very easily led by propaganda. I think Rachel and I discussed this a couple of weeks back in one of the arcs. I says, well, yeah, when I was in my late teens, I was like, yeah, right on. I want a woman president. Why was I saying this? Because I was told to think this from watching television, and I was very easily influenced. That, like I said, that because I am a rational person, that didn't last very long. That didn't last past the age of like 22, I think. But yeah, I was definitely subjected to a lot of propaganda. And that's been going on through movies and television and music for, well, gosh, yes, 100 years, right? The Jazz Age would have started that, right? When women were first getting career type jobs, right? Like, I think there was what movie was that discussed this? I can't remember the name of it now, but it was about flappers who went to the big city and got their first great typist job. You know? Okay,
that's what what the problem is, right? What you just described. Okay, so this is the I actually don't know what the right answer is because we still need to do our feudal breakdown of current commentariat discussions where it's personal relations define a lot of what's going on, and it's not like I have in my head this perfect government that I know that we're all like should be aiming for or something like that. I've just been trying to think about the way we see each other behaving. With the Industrial Revolution, and I've come to really appreciate this much better, the first thing that happens is the women are taken out of the homes. And Evita, in your topics that you had for us to talk about, one of them was that fashion show.
Yes. Yeah. Brandy Melville.
Yeah. And I said, okay, maybe we will go there, but I just thinking about it. Okay. So with the Industrial Revolution, literally the first thing that happens is the women are taken out of the homes because the Industrial Revolution, the industry that the Industrial Revolution really begins with is textiles. And textile work had been women's work forever, right? That's what they did. They spun, they wove, but they'd done it in piecework in their homes. And I think some of it's definitely in Paris in the Middle Ages. There are silk workers in the city and things like that. But you think if most of the industrial production is spinning wheels and looms at home, if you as a factory owner get all these machines that spin the threads and are steam powered looms and stuff like that, the workers that you're actually attracting to go work in your factory are women, because they're actually the ones who are skilled to do it, right? They're the textile workers.
Well, they're skilled and you can pay them less, right? Same with children.
Well, no, it's this. So it's funny because like which side is which? I have right now on the gender and age view of economic systems, and like which one's socialism, which one's capitalism. That women tend to prefer socialism and men tend to prefer capitalism. I think women tend to prefer the idea that there's going to be a social network of work that they're engaged in, and men have an ideal of setting up their own businesses and creating their own structures.
But I mean, even within your own structure, you still have a social system. So how does that fully explain why women would be attracted to socialism?
I'm not there yet. Let me just get them in the factories.
Okay, sorry.
So
jumping ahead.
And this is all in our Bridgerton meditations too, which I finished reading the 8 books. There's a lot of sex scenes in those books. All with virgins. I mean, oh my gosh, she wrote 8 books about women losing their virginity. And she had to like
every romance novel ever.
Well, she had to make a family with 8 children in it so that there would be enough virgins in the story. I'm not kidding. But they're all very virtuous, and so they'll get married, right? And then they have kids. That's also at the same time as the women are, being drawn into all the cities, and I have this idea now of there's this fiction that develops in the 19th century of the right of first night that the lords allegedly had in the Middle Ages of, the lord of the manor gets to sleep with the women when they're first married.
Braveheart, yeah.
Right, and Gibson puts in Braveheart. That's an utter fiction. It did not happen. Never. It's nothing. I mean, they're
good plot vehicle though.
It would never have happened, and Alain Barreau did a whole book on it. But what's interesting about it is when the myth develops, and it's there's some layers and complications and anti-clericalism and stuff in it, but the fundamental reality is the myth develops in the 19th century. And I'm thinking, okay, why does the myth develop in the 19th century? Lords taking women away from their husbands.
Oh.
Which is exactly what Engels described in The Condition of the Working Class in England happening in Manchester in the textile factories. The women had work, they had wages. The men were not getting work because these are textile mills, and Engels has a whole account of how the men are emasculated because the women are the ones bringing home the money for the family, and the men they have to sit home darning socks and stuff, and they're humiliated, whereas the women had the work in the factories. That's the context in which that mythology of, oh, the Lord took all the girls came from. It's literally women in factory work, just like you said, the typist pool. All of these women in the workplace problems come out of that they disrupted the factory, disrupted the family, destroyed the family, and created this. There's no longer domestic life except for the kind of idealized version that the gentry get. Have I lost? Is Evita? Are you there? Okay.
Casey, I'm here, but I think Casey might be muted. I don't know.
Casey's moving. We're always having trouble with Skype dropping Casey.
Well, I'll just say something
That's
that
my theory
that
now.
reminded me of. I did an interview with my mom recently about this woman who's actually an expert on birth control, hormonal birth control, and talks about all the negative effects of it. And this was sort of an aside in our conversation, but she basically said that there's been studies about what attracts women to men in marriage, and women, when you're working and you're working the same amount as your husband, or maybe you're even working more than your husband, women will get annoyed, and understandably, when they're not doing housework, right? When you're not doing the dishes, when you're not, doing the laundry and cleaning, and so there's this expectation in a lot of modern marriages that the work is equal. But the problem is when women see their men doing domestic labor, they don't find them attractive. They really don't. They would rather their husband go out and do yard work, or go outside and be worried, like whatever it is. But domestic labor is actually a major turnoff. So it's there. We're seeing these issues not just with these gender issues, not just with people that are dating, and it's not within the marriages themselves. You've actually made it, you found your partner, and we're still having conflict in modern life.
Right. And I think that's, I don't know what the answer is, because the condition of modern life is not something that happened 100 years ago. It's something it's our entire physical structure of the cities and the way our industry works and everything.
And we can't, most families, I mean, they cannot afford to have one income. I mean, it's not plausible for a lot of people. I mean, especially if you're somebody who, doesn't want to send your kids to public school, right? You want to save money and send them to a Catholic school or something. The wife is going to have to do something to make it work. I mean, this happened in our family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for as long as she possibly could. We had like 6 kids and 7 kids. And we were all going to Catholic schools. She's like, I have to go and do something to make things work. And a lot of people, and not everybody has 7 kids, obviously, or 9 kids like we have, but it's still, I think financial restraints are a big deal for a lot of people, and it's just not a possibility for them to have income.
Right. Well, so what just taking it to it's like the way, industrialization broke up the families to start with. And Ingalls he's describing that in Manchester in the 1840s, and creating also these gender role difficulties already. I think the thing is, I can make an argument for why women ended up feeling like the state needed to take care of everything. Let me see if I can get it. Okay, so the Bridgerton idea, right? These are these idealized, everybody falls in love. If you lose your virginity to him, he'll marry you, and you'll have kids, and everybody will, have a great family life. Although, I mean, the characters get put through various adventures to get to their marriage. But anyway, what the women in those stories want is the masculine man who will take care of them. And Evita, you said that, right? It's like the women, they're looking to the state to take care of them. It is definitely true if your husband is not a great, I don't know, whatever, creator of wealth and fame, and you're going to be scared, right?
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me now?
Back? Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm back. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. But
the Skype demons always get us, right?
The Skype demons hate me.
If you fantasize your favorite, it's like, I want, the man who's going to, okay, here's my fantasy, right? A house. I just want a house, right?
Well, I was going to say the early 19th century, the romance novel was born with Jane Austen.
Exactly. There we go. Yes.
Right? There's your fantasy Mr. Darcy. Everybody wants him, right? This big, strong, rich man who's going to take care of everything.
Got a big house, too.
Yeah, and a big house. She did marry him for the house.
It's the house. Sure. It's straight up the house, right? So, and you can see it. I don't read that many romance novels, but you don't have to, because it's this.
No, they're the same story.
It's the same story
like every time.
And you would say, what do women want? Well, they sure buy the books that say over and over and over again, they want a masculine man who will take care of them and give them a house.
Yes. Yeah, and the bad guy's always this kind of weaselly little person who's trying to take advantage of the women, kind of like a boss at a factory, huh?
Right. So the thing is, I think, you know, it's easy to, well, when you're in it, okay, and this is the other thing in the romance novels, that it's actually perilous trying to find the person that you want to marry. And this is my recommendation to all those watching. I've said it before: don't have sex before you're married. because as we've because as we've learned over the last several decades, including Casey in my lifetime, it confuses things, right? Mm-hmm. The Evita, I think you've written about the hookup culture problem before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are neurological changes that happen to a woman when she has sex, especially with different partners. So if you have, you know, and also, you know, we don't the left likes to create this narrative that women feel the same way about sex men do, and the reality is that's just not true.
Right.
When you have sex with someone, when you're intimate with them, there is a bond with them, and so if you have bonds with all these different people, your brain explodes, right? Like, right. I mean, you're in emotional distress. You're feeling like you are not grounded. Whereas like a man, he's like, this is great. This is what my biology says to do, right? To have as many kids as possible. I mean, depending on the guy, there are some men that literally have that in their mind. You know, like there's two kind of evolutionary theories about it, that like some men, they had a bunch of kids with a bunch of women to make sure that their, you know, their biological line continued on. And then there was some that stayed with one woman and they, you know, but that's kind of aside from the point. But it really does explode women's minds when they have all these different sexual partners and they're really unhappy. And I saw this in college a lot. I mean, you know, there were girls who were, you know, they had like one boyfriend or whatever, or they were dating someone, but they didn't have sex. And there was a real difference between those women and the ones who were involved in hookup culture and the ones who I think really were going there for validation a lot of the time too. And that's why I think this daddy issues thing comes in again, you know, like it's oftentimes the same women who are experiencing these, like the cult of leftism, right? The ones who didn't have a very good father figure, the ones who sought a bunch of different men who feel really insecure in their love lives and their home lives. And then the leftism is like the answer to all of their problems, or so they think.
Well, they're right there saying you didn't do anything wrong. Keep doing what you're doing, right? They know something's wrong, but they don't know what it is. But you know, here's a movement saying, no, right on, just yeah, you're doing the right thing. Keep doing it. So they're being affirmed in their mistakes, and they keep making the same mistakes. And it's very sad.
Well, okay, so the other thing that's missing, and that, I mean, everybody should read the Bridgerton novels because they've got great sex scenes, if I haven't said that before. I mean, seriously, I couldn't believe it. It's like another one.
Was it really a surprise after the third or fourth one?
Anyway.
Did you watch the Netflix series? That's all I saw. And there were sex scenes, but there weren't that many. It was kind of like, I don't know.
It's the next. So the Netflix. We do keep planning on doing a full, you know, arc episode on the Bridgerton. No, I watched the Netflix ones, and then I decided I needed to read the novels, and then I read the whole thing. Right, there are 8 of them.
Were they better than the series?
They're I mean, so they're similar and different. There's certain things, like the Queen doesn't really feature in the books, which I think is an interesting and important addition in the movies, in the television series. The sex is about the same, I think. In fact,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's more detailed in the books.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I've lost my thread again. What was I doing? Oh yes. Okay, feature one that she was trying to write one. I haven't really watched a lot of interviews or read her account of how she came up with it, but she realized she needed a big family of characters to be able to do a connected series, because for romance novels, basically the courtship and the marriage, that's it, right? You can't repeat it because then it loses the romance. It turns into a different kind of story, right? If there's multiple partners and the marriages break up and things, right? So she needed a big family of characters to have the interlocking stories, which is very effective and quite interesting. But you realize that what that also gives the women is brothers. It is true that the father dies, and so the older brother has to take on the patriarch role, right? And then he has to be responsible for his younger sisters. But if in any of the situations the woman, you know, the sisters are, you know, their virtue is compromised, they've got four brothers in there, the older ones, you know, to say you're marrying her, right? Yeah. And I think that feature of large families, and Evita and I have talked about this a lot because she wrote her paper, a long paper with me on this problem. It's like how birth control was as much about dealing with large families as it was about population explosion. It's, you break up not just the mother and father, but also all of the siblings who are there looking out for their sisters.
Yes. Right. Yeah, that's very true.
So the women, the women and men now they're so vastly atomized. Of, you come to college on your own, you have none of your family around, you don't have your parents, you don't have, you know, maybe you have your siblings, but there's none of the network that's actually going to protect you from getting involved with people, you know, quote, just for pleasure, right?
Can I say something else, like, about what it's not just that they don't have the network. If they do, you demonize the network. Because I saw this video of, it was an older sister. She's an OnlyFans girl. So everybody knows what OnlyFans is, but basically she's a prostitute. And her little brother it was a sit down interview, and he was literally crying, saying, I'm really embarrassed. People know and they watch your videos. My friends do. So, I mean, even though he's a little brother, he's obviously wants his sister to be virtuous. He's embarrassed by what she's doing. He's trying to express that to her. But of course, the culture says, oh, he's wrong. He's trying to control her body. He's, you know, not respecting her, her autonomy or whatever. I mean, so even if you have a network and you have good people in your life trying to tell you this is not for you, you shouldn't be sleeping around like this, you shouldn't be an OnlyFans girl, trying to guide you in your life, women reject that. And not only do the women reject that, but the culture tells them that their family's in the wrong. So it's actually not just, sometimes you have the network, the support system, and you're demonizing it. So that's another problem.
Yeah, well, they're rejecting their support system and adopting another one. Right.
That's true. Yeah.
They're adopting the state, and they're adopting the culture, which is being driven by the state. I mean, it's all state propaganda at this point. So you have to realize that.
The state at this point is our Draco Alchemicus. It's the dragon that wants you addicted.
Yes. Offers you everything you could want.
Yeah. And that sex is, I mean, our friend Dr. Jones has talked about this a lot, right? That sex can be used in exactly the same way as opium or oxy or cocaine or any of the, and it's like, so you tell everyone, oh, you know, you should, I mean, the whole nonsense of, if you don't have sex all the time, you're going to be sick. That's the Freudian claim, right? It's like, oh, you're repressed, and that, you know, you need to release.
Which was around 1920, wasn't it?
Well, and there was an op-ed, I'm forgetting what, it might have been Vanity Fair or Vox, I forget which one of those V-named networks, but they basically said women shouldn't get married young because they need to sow their wild oats like men. Like it was.
Good grief.
Right. Like you have to experience the world, because if you do, you'll get married and then you'll be repressed and regret it. It's just, and that's the message that that young women are getting.
That is such an obvious lie.
There's been studies that show if you are a woman and you have had multiple sexual partners, you are more dissatisfied in your marriage than even a man who's had multiple sexual partners when he's married. So it has a significant impact on women. And basically, you're setting yourself up for failure in marriage if you sow your wild oats like a man supposedly does. It's just terrible advice.
Yeah. Well, even the expression "sow your oats," right? Women don't have oats; we have eggs. We sit on them. Men spread their seed everywhere. Women don't do that. I mean, the expression itself is strictly masculine, isn't it?
Yes. Okay, so realize this is all a giant parenthesis of whether or not we should have the vote.
We should. Okay, next.
No, no, but So the thing is, I think the functioning society is the vote claim is the only way you will be taken care of is if you are, as an isolated individual, capable of acting collectively with other isolated individuals. It's anti-family from the beginning, right? Because and we could there's a negative side of the family stuff, which is feuds. That you end up in, your family tells you that you have to be enemies with so-and-so because we've always been enemies with them, and cue the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? I'll claim my Scottish part of my ancestry at this point. So it's not as if there's not bad things that come out of families. Okay, that's fine. But the one vote, claiming that women won't have a say in the functioning of the society if they don't have a vote it's already part of the trick, right, of trying to break up the actual functioning social structures, which include, the head of the family being responsible for taking care of his, sisters and daughters and wife and all of their concerns.
So they must not have been doing that.
Well, see, there's your problem. There's the problem, isn't it? Because it is, definitely true that not all men there was no glorious golden age when all the men were virtuous.
Right.
Yeah. So it's these.
Right. And I think that's where the argument, at least from a lot of the younger men I've seen on YouTube, I can't think of any names now. It's just kind of a general attitude is that men are more virtuous than women when it comes to wanting to do the right thing when they're voting. And I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, now we have Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate.
Perfect. Think of the devil.
I am the biggest Andrew Tate apologist. I can't say anything bad about him. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't.
Well, no, and this is, I think what Casey is pointing to is this problem of there is a claim, it's like claiming, it's like all, basically Adam and Eve, right? Are we going to blame Eve or Adam for the fall? Right. Yeah.
Well, Adam blamed Eve Adam
blames Eve. Yeah.
Eve blamed the snake, right? Eve didn't blame Adam. Of course she couldn't, but yeah. Yeah. So who was the more virtuous there? Well, they were both not virtuous.
Need to start there, which is unfortunate. It's like, yes, it's sort of like, we're not saying women should, okay. So back to, that's why I'm worried about the way we've constituted democracy as one vote. It's like votes that can split families and things like that. But I think what women ultimately vote for in their choices is that house. Right. You want the security of knowing that the family that you have is going to be taken care of. And if the men, like this is the side of the men, if the men aren't actually stepping up to that role, then women panic. And I think that's particularly why in college it's easy for the women to get sort of socialism as the answer, because they feel like they can at least act collectively with each other.
Yes. I think that's such a good point. Sorry.
I'm glad. So that's why I think that these are toxic versions of good, right? It's like the women, and the thing is, we've talked about this with the Barbie stuff too. Is that women, or the social sexual hierarchy, and women have a hierarchy. Women do need a functioning social community, which has different features that I don't think we can unpack today. But women need a functioning social community, and it has particular strengths and toxicities. And part of its toxicity is, of course, group inclusion and exclusion, cliques and mean girls and stuff. So I think socialism, insofar as it tends to that kind of structure, tends to those sorts of vices, right? Whereas men, if they like being competitive and working out and training themselves in that way, that has other kinds of toxicities and vices. But their vice only works as a failure of virtue, and the virtues are real. And that's where we're generally, I feel like in the bigger conversation, failing to understand why these things are so powerful. They're powerful because they're drawing on virtues too.
Yeah, I mean, socialism, right? It's very feminine.
It's very
feminine. It's a good point. Yeah.
It's your knitting
I
circle.
Think Camille, well, I was going to say that it is a knitting circle, or like Camille Paglia has talked about this, that, in the past, women would not, there was a hunter-gatherer societies if you're going way back, and women did a lot of the work together. But even if you look at 100 years ago, women lived not just in a nuclear family, but they lived with their extended family nearby, and they were cooking and they were sharing household labor and sharing the child rearing together. And that was, you're home with your husband in the evenings, maybe as he's leaving and going off to work, but most of the day you spent in community together with other women. Right. That was how women used to live. And now it's, we're all just by ourselves. So of course it lends itself to everything we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Industrial Revolution broke up towns first and neighborhoods, and then families second. And now we're 200 and something years on. And we're all living individually.
And miserable.
Many women, women sadly living individually and miserable. Right. And they don't even know why, because they're doing everything that, my social circle says I should do. So why am I not happy?
So I have been thinking about like how leftists are identifying the problems, and they always have the worst solutions to them. But if you look on TikTok, there's a few things that are happening right now. One of them is they're talking about how we're not allowed to ask for favors anymore, right? Like if you're saying, oh, I need a ride home from the airport, young people don't ask for that kind of thing. Like maybe your generation is a little different, but they really don't, because we're living in such an individualized society. And also because of technology, you're able to ask for an Uber. If you're going to go somewhere, you're Uber Eats. If you want to order food, nobody's going to pick it up for you. So like the community living is gone. So they want to create community, right? Because they feel alone, and they rightfully feel alone, and their solutions are bad. You're seeing some stuff like this with like in the dating world too, right? Another thing before I get to that, they'll also say that our neighborhoods are ugly. Our societies are ugly, right? And they say, oh, we need to have walkable cities, right? And which they used to be walkable cities. If you look in Europe, all these, they're much more beautiful. They are walkable. But then, of course, they go to urban planning and they start talking about 15-minute cities and then digital IDs. And it's like all these horrible things are connected to the real problems that they're identifying. I don't know.
No, that's very accurate. Yes.
Yeah, they're misusing, I guess, the idea of community and turning these 15-minute cities into just it's extending the prison planet, right? You can't leave your little pod anymore.
Well, this is actually, now I realize I got our webpage set up. Hopefully the Twitter is still there. Yes. Okay, we got Cologne Cathedral showing, but this is, one of the things we were projecting to talk about, we'll talk about it now, is this Culture Critic site that got a little troll attached to it this week saying, oh, this is white supremacist. But one of the things I noticed that he's showing, I'm showing it now, is like he's got a picture from, wow, that's September 2023. I don't know what it's showing now, but he says the American mind cannot comprehend this, and it's basically a town on a island, right? And it's just a town.
Yeah,
it's just this, and a lot of the beauty that we've lost, photos that are out there, I mean, they're European cities a lot, but the main thing there is they're the pedestrian part of the city. they're human scaled for feet, and that's why they're walkable, because they were made
or one donkey. Right?
They're feet cities rather than car cities.
Well, I think the urban planners would love that. That's the whole point of the 15-minute city. They don't want people driving in cars, and they say it's for the climate. This is slightly off topic, but I don't believe them.
No, I don't either. But this is where we're in this sort of difficult situation, right?
Yeah. I mean, they are beautiful. So you're saying, but aren't they beautiful? Wouldn't you like to have this?
But it it won't be that way. That's the thing that's so frustrating about it, right? Because we don't like I had this conversation with my husband when I was like, when we one day buy a house, like I want you to make my driveway cobblestone. And he was like, "Do you have any idea how expensive?" He's a concrete guy, so he knows how to do it. Like he's been doing concrete for like 6 years. So he has the skill set, but he's like, "You have no idea how hard it is, how skillful you have to be. People don't have the skills, nor do we have the I think the mindset to build beautiful buildings anymore. Like architects that go to school and study for it, they produce the worst buildings. And it's not because I think somebody's telling them to. I just think it comes naturally to them because the art is a reflection of our culture, which is disgusting and ugly right now. Mm-hmm. So even if they build the 15-minute cities and it's walkable, they're not going to be beautiful. They're going to be set for surveillance, not for human enjoyment and pleasure.
Right. And it won't be grandma surveillance, right? It'll be nasty little robots and cameras.
Right.
Everywhere. But Eiffel Tower was first built. The Parisians hated it. They thought it was ugly. And it was built to highlight the building materials that were new then. It was the birth of the skyscraper, right? These were iron and steel they were using. Is it possible that the architects, now I agree, they're coming out of their architect studies and they're building things that just look ugly. They don't look good, they look ugly. Is that because it's being presented to them in their classes that way, that this is a nice way to do it? Or was it a frog in boiling water type thing where they just got so used to building up bigger and better because they had all these new, stronger materials and these motorized elevators that they could do these things, and then they just forgot why they were doing it. They just because they could, and they just gradually became uglier. I mean, there was the brutalist movement in the mid 20th century, but I mean I think that was unique. But what are
Well, I have a theory, but Professor Fulton Brown probably knows the answer, as she always does. But I
always have an answer. It doesn't mean it's right.
Right. Well, but I wonder if it could have to do with just the culture of efficiency, right? That everything has to be like it has to serve a purpose. It has to be economical. It has to, so when those are your priorities, it takes a back burner, is on the back burner. And so that was a focus of many public buildings in the past, right? If you look at a cathedral, the purpose is not to be efficient, it's to uplift your soul and think about something higher than just like, is this going to be the quickest route up the skyscraper? It's not being built for the same purposes. And so because our intentions are oriented in a different way, we are producing ugliness. But then there's something else to be said about modern art, right? And so modern architecture might be because of this orientation toward like efficiency, but then the art itself is also very ugly. So maybe that's a sign that there's something sicker behind all of it. I'm not sure.
Oh, I think there is something deeper and sicker, but let's do the medium version of it first. I think some of it is it's what we've talked in the stream about a number of times about McLuhan's understanding of media. And the way in which the environment, the media has this environmental effect, and things like the electric light and the railway and the roads and the cars, and it's like that. Basically, if when you fly and you look down over the cities, we look like a computer grid. Our cities do, right? And I think we're living in a world built by machines. Mm-hmm. We're living in a world that it works for machines. It's all constructed. It's like you have all of the like outside.
It's built for machines.
It's built for machines by machines. It's a machine world.
Yeah.
It's utterly machine world, which is why people respond so strongly to the human carved sized buildings of the older world, because they were built by human beings for human beings. That's why people like older houses. They're built by human beings.
Yes. It's a completely different feeling when you walk into an old stone church versus some nasty thing that was built in 1957, and thinking of the church in my old neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah, it's a completely different feel. It's a warm, homey, welcoming feeling as opposed to you just walked into a giant lean-to, that was put together quickly. It may be structurally sound, but
they're made for machines. And so if you look at things like the outside of Chicago, right, and you fly and you're seeing all the distribution centers, and you have pods for the trucks to go in, and the trucks come out, and the trucks, it's like everything is just, it's a grid that is made to make it easy for the machines to move around, and the machines built it. And I was having this contemplation standing in the park, where I take the dog, right, and there's older houses around, and they're built out of brick, and they're built clearly before machine construction was normal. And then there's the skyscrapers and it's just two different worlds. There's the skyscraper buildings, and there's the brick houses. And I think McLuhan would just point to it's the media itself is creating that these effects, just like handwritten manuscripts to printed type changes things. He would also say, you recover things that are lost in some ways, but you also lose things with the new media. So it's never as simple, like everything gets better, right? So like Dubai just drowned, right? Because they can make it rain.
That's
crazy. We are suffering obviously from the satanic worship of progress and higher and control and all of that, because it always backfires with effects.
Tower of Babel, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, as we've also talked about, it's like, oh, but this is cool. We get to have this conversation in the internet, right? And we are, as with the and this is like, go back and forth on it. With the Industrial Revolution, you end up with industrial produced textiles, which, and Evita, you showed me that HBO trailer for the documentary on the fashion show, and one of the things it had was all of that trash textiles washing up on the beaches somewhere. I mean, that Africa is absolutely flooded with donated clothes, right? talk about good intentions backfiring, right? Their textile industries have been destroyed by our goodwill to send them.
So Michael Jones covered that too, I think, a while back.
There's a particular word for the used clothing, right? And
fast fashion, but that's
it's something about like the rags, right? Whatever the rag clothes, but it means that they have no native textile work anymore. When England, its textile revolution destroyed India's economy because of the factory produced textiles. So we're in this like, but wait a minute, but that's the good thing, isn't it? It means we got more stuff and people can live more comfortable lives. And we say, yes, that's true. Electric light means you can stay up all night. But on the other hand, you lose other things.
Yeah. On the other hand, you're staying up all night. And it's very bad for your health.
Well, that apparently people used to wake up in the middle of the night anyway and eat chicken and but that's different. That it's
that doesn't sound too healthy either.
There was a famous paper about 20 years ago that said the sleep we have lost, and it was about how there are records from before electric light that people would go to sleep when basically sunset, dusk or whatever, but then wake up in the middle of the night and they'd be awake for an hour or a few and then go back to sleep. And of course, monks took advantage of this to sing. They did prayers in the middle of the night, but everybody else did other stuff.
So they would just nap.
The sleep cycles were different before electric light.
Interesting. Yeah. I always wake up at 3 a.m. I don't know why.
Okay, we've got some comments here from a Jack Duffy. Hi, Jack.
Oh, that's my brother.
He says, "Go Evita." This is great. So he said, "Computer renders are ruining design from clothes to building to cars. No handmade prototypes." Yeah, it's like if everything's rendered.
Yeah.
So we have for our poetry, we're using actual human beings for our artists.
We are. They're awesome.
Yes. Because the AI art is not the same. And then everybody's going, oh, but that's cool. You can get art for cheap. And it's like, yeah, but you got no soul anymore.
Can't get art for cheap. You can get a pale comparison of real art.
Right.
In my opinion.
Right.
And you can tell it's like fake sugar instead of real sugar.
Right. So this is right. So going back to our problem with the, whether women want capitalism or socialism, women want capitalism or socialism, it's a little bit of a false binary, because they're both industrial solutions.
Yeah.
And well, this is continuing to be what we're writing Draco Chemicus about. Because how do we find virtue in the midst of our own tech? And that's true at other levels too. I mean, cities in antiquity were also considered dens of vice, right? The Colosseum was not the Colosseum was not a happy nice place.
Well, I mean, the Amish are famous for rejecting technology, but they rejected it in the 17th century.
Yeah, so they still have wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they saw it then.
And clothes.
This is creating, not paying attention to God.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so we've got to tell us more about. We'll go back to Joe Rogan and Tate. Tell us more about your. So we're a little bit out of it in our ladies' room. What the men are paying attention to.
Oh yeah, you want me to? So I have some thoughts about Tate. I understand the criticisms of him. I think, he's a Muslim, and now he is, but before he was doing that, he made a lot of money, I guess, basically prostituting cam girls online. So like they would scam these girls that he was basically the pimp of to get money from men on the internet. I mean, but it really is just virtual prostitution. It's a very bad thing, very sinful thing. But I'm sympathetic toward him and toward what he is saying to young men, because, and I'll start by saying that the best person to teach a young boy how to be a man is his father. But the problem is there aren't a lot of fathers out there, or if there are, sometimes they're really bad dads. And so a lot of young men are trying to find those fatherly figures in the man on the internet with influencer Andrew Tate. And Tate, of course, promotes some vices, some very negative things, like you were talking about, Professor Fulton Brown, that there are some good things with masculinity, and then there are some vices attached to these virtues when they go too far. And Andrew Tate is a good example of that. But I think ultimately having somebody tell young men, your masculinity is okay. It's okay to be a man. It's okay to go work out and make yourself somebody, to have some aspirations to attract a woman that way, instead of just complaining about how all women are anti-man and you become an incel. I mean, these are positive things that he's telling young men to do. He's filling in a void. It's not the perfect fill-in. Of course it's not. I mean, the perfect fill-in, right, is Christ, right, which is our perfect father, or a real father, or a father of your own, right, and in this world. But to disparage him and to say, no, the manosphere is all bad, which a lot of right-wingers have done, I think is negative. I think, unfortunately, while Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro might be great, or Jordan Peterson, they're never going to fill that void, because these are older men, right? These are not the kind of people that a young man is going to look up to in the way that they will Tate, and do the things that a young man needs to do in these early years, because these older men have gone a different path. And frankly, they're intellectuals. And most young men are not like that, right? Most young men want to be physical, do things with their hands. And Andrew Tate really, really fills in that void. And so I'm very sympathetic toward him and what he does.
Is he not a pimp anymore?
No, he's not.
Oh, when did he stop doing that?
I mean, who knows? He claims a few years ago, but now he makes money. I supposedly with his streaming. He has like a massive Rumble channel. He is like an investor in a lot of different ways. He claims he doesn't do that anymore. I think Candace Owens did like a deep dive into his past, and some of the charges against him in Romania are apparently pretty ridiculous. Like a lot of the young women who were claiming that he was, holding them hostage or something, then actually came out and said, no, we weren't. Like, there's a lot of unknowns. And frankly, I don't really believe a lot of the charges. I find them to be kind of targeted because, right before it happened, he was deplatformed everywhere. He was debanked. He lost even his Uber account they got rid of. So when somebody's accused of thought crimes and then there's criminal charges, my alarm bells go off immediately. I'm not saying I know the truth, but I'm saying I'm very skeptical because we've seen them do that to everybody associated with the Trump administration, right? So alarm bells go off there, and
the Uber thing's kind of weird. I mean, it's not like they never pick up prostitutes or pimps.
Right. And the other thing is,
kind of silly.
You think about Jeffrey Epstein, right? I mean, how many years was this man operating in the United States? Journalists and authorities knew what he was doing, but nobody charged him with anything until years later. So they pick and choose, right? Authorities pick and choose who they go after, and I find it to be very disingenuous. And they weaponize themselves against people that are ideologically opposed to them. So, yeah.
Well, so I absolutely agree. So I'd say women are at a loss because we've lost our communities that would have like the good Barbie version of things of women working together in our towns and schools and communities. And I did my 3 Cheers for White Men all those years ago because I was sick of having men attacked for nothing. Saying like the men around, for the most part, the men around me in my life, even with my dad being my dad and leaving my mom and stuff like that, you realize how much support we've been given as women in Western society. It's enormous, right? And I'm very frustrated with women claiming that they didn't help. I mean, I was obviously helped by men my entire life. And it's, those, that was an older generation. It's like, yeah, and they helped me. Right. So it just seemed to me bitchy, frankly, to not be willing to acknowledge the degree to which, men in the West, and this is, we've talked a little bit about Islam. Islam has different kinds of masculine and male and female relations. Men in the West, with chivalry and Christianity, honor women, and that's why I'd say one of the the bad things about the suffragettes and the vote and the feminism and everything is that it used men's decency against them.
Well, Condoleezza Rice said years ago, if I never would have gotten where I was today if I had waited around for a non-white male mentor. White men helped me in my career because they mentored me.
Yeah, but it's even more than that. It's just back when I did my 3 Cheers for White Men and I got all the pushback from on the Facebook group, and I did a series of posts on what I meant by chivalry, and I could show over and over and over again the way in which women have been, not just valued, that sounds like we're commodities or something, respected and revered and elevated in Christian society since the beginning. And it is, it's the ideal of Ephesians of, the man and the husband and wife should be as Christ is to the church. It's like Christ is going to not take care of the church. That's ridiculous. She's his bride. Yeah. So that the bride is precious and honored and cared for, and you make her a house, right? It's frankly stunned me that feminism got so vicious in my lifetime, because there was, as it does, yes, they're vicious women, yes, they're vicious men, but the sort of premise that men in our society were not either both frustrated with us and also proud of us just seemed to me nonsense.
The viciousness of the feminist movement is because, it's they got everything they wanted. and said, but they're still not happy or satisfied. So there has to be a problem somewhere I can fix.
It feels insatiable.
It is
what would satiate?
Yeah.
I don't think anything will. I don't think anything will because it's an ideology they're married to. It's like a religion.
I feel like a really good way to talk about this with women is to just say, okay, we're oppressed. How? You know, like make them give you concrete examples of like, where is the misogyny in society? Because I took a class that I actually mentioned with you, Professor, you may not remember, my senior year, called The Just War Theory. And our professor was making an aside. He was having, in his aside comment, he basically said, you know, do the women in the class, would they say that you know, women are treated equally at the University of Memphis? And then like all the girls in the class said no. And I didn't want to be a contrarian. I'm not annoying in class. I try to like, I pick my battles. So I didn't say anything, but a really good response would have been, how were women at the University of Chicago not treated equally to men? Just asking that question, because I think a lot of times we, like, women, because they want to be sympathetic and they say, oh well, these women that I know were you know, raped or somebody got away with you know, sexually assaulting them, or this woman said that she wasn't paid fairly, and it's like, okay, those are anecdotal examples that people are giving you. Look at your life. How in your life have you experienced the misogyny and the sexism? Like, explain it to me. And most of the time they can't. And so I think that's a good strategy when you're talking to them, like this, like, articulate where the inequity is, because they can't, right? And then that opens some doors up to actually have a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Campus Reform has a really good series of videos where they do that. They interview young people on campus. I think they brought up that feminist question also. You know, how are women oppressed? You know, and the answers are always pretty funny.
What do they say? How do they say?
They can't. They can't say because they are. Well, everybody knows that. You know, it's still
there was
a word.
I think I saw that video and one of the girls said, "Oh, I really have to get to class right now," and she left. She just like walked away. That, I mean, they have nothing to say.
Well, so I have my dating theory of all of this, because Fox Day he's still working on his sociosexual hierarchy book. After, I don't know, Evita, whether you followed much of this with us, but after nearly banning me on his Sigma Game blog because I was asking questions in the irritating feminine way that I have.
I'm surprised I'm still allowed on too.
What?
I'm surprised I'm still allowed to comment.
Yeah, it's like he's got us tamed so well. We barely, you know, it's like, do I dare say something on this one? Because he keeps talking about women and what we think. That he is pointing to, I think, the sort of general frustration between women and men, which is, and this is why the romance novels are so useful, right? Women dream of men in particular ways, and men dream of women in particular ways, and sometimes these match, but most of the time they're at odds with each other.
True.
Right? And it's sort of like, okay, so what are the worst things that the men have done to me? Well, I can think, he's like, he didn't, okay, what, you know, the handsome guy, he was rude to me, he didn't ask me out, he abused me, he didn't, wait, what, he wasn't interested in you? I think maybe we've got something else going on here. And the opposite for the men too, right? It's like the women are all bitchy and horrible because, oh, she won't talk to me. It's like, well, she's not interested in you.
Right.
And
that's useful advice for men.
Well, that is what Vox is trying to show them. It's like, you know, maybe you're aiming too high in your ambitions here, but then
the Andrew Tate advice is be desirable.
Well, ironically, that's Vox's advice too. Lift, right? They all say lift.
Yeah.
Make yourself a stronger man. Make yourself someone that the women would be interested in. But the obverse for the women is difficult because, you know, we like the handsome guys too. and there's more of us than there are of them. Wait, something like that, right? That's a trope in the romance novels. It's always the wallflower gets the handsome guy. And it's like, right, who writes these novels?
This is the equivalent of Revenge of the Nerds, right, for women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I really can't read too many romance novels. You know why? Because I'll eat too many cookies. I noticed this some time ago I mainly read detective novels right now I'm reading Rob Crozie's Rex Nihilo space spoofs, good. Which are hilarious. But I'd be reading I'd be reading detective stories, and every so often, there's sort of a romantic twist to them. And every so often I just have this terrible desire to eat an entire bag of cookies. And I'm like, wait a minute. And you realize
conditioning.
Well, but there was one romance series that I was reading, and all the women and characters in the book did was bake and dream of wood floors and sun-drenched, in sun-drenched sitting rooms. I'm like, I need some cookies now. It's comfort food. It's literally comfort food, right? Because the Bridgerton novels are just as guilty of this. That it's Pride and Prejudice over and over and over again, right? The bookish, intellectual, woman dreams after the handsome guy that falls in love with her and realizes that she's more beautiful and how nobody ever saw that she was. I'm like, okay, I like this. Yeah. This is a nice story. On the other hand, I rather suspect that women who write novels like that wish they, could capture the football captain kind of thing.
Well, yeah, living vicariously through their stories,
which is harmless enough on the one hand, but it's also the same kind of problem that Vox is describing for the men. Going, I want nothing but the most beautiful elf maiden there is. They all want to marry Arwen.
Right. That was funny. Remembering that.
I'm trying to convince that Arwen is valuable because she's a virgin, and they're going, no, that's not right. How many sex partners has she had? And I say one, her husband. I think I finally won that one, but Vox never gave in.
How dare you besmirch our fair Arwen?
My husband always said he had a crush on her when he was in high school, middle school.
See.
So in the movies, though,
Well,
she's beautiful. She was stunning.
Yeah, Liv Tyler is a beautiful woman.
Yes.
And I know very well I'm not Arwen. I aim for Éowyn.
Right.
Yeah.
But Shield maiden.
We can all be Éowyn, maybe.
Hey, I understand Éowyn's struggle, and also
and you fence.
Like that, she ends up with a good man. I think a lot of what both feminism and the masculine, this is why courtship is like, I think did Tolkien say this, or did Humphrey Carpenter say this about Tolkien? It's like finding your spouse is huge. It's enormous.
Yeah.
And we write centuries worth of stories about finding that person, and it's tense and difficult and terrifying. And it would help if the young people had some help from the older people, so that they could be guided a little bit. Which is another of the problems that the modernity has created. It's like, oh, don't listen to those parents or those old people or those older siblings or anything like that. They are not. They don't have your best interest. It's like, yeah, but you don't know what you're doing.
They're getting it from both ends, though.
Right.
I mean, the parents are told just, go do your own thing and spend your children's inheritance.
Right.
The children say, don't listen to your parents. And they're working both ends to just split the families apart. Right.
Yeah.
Still going on.
Yeah. We're talking about like male-female animosity, but there's so much generational animosity too. I'm noticing it from like Gen Zers. I mean, they blame the boomers for everything. They're like, you're bankrupting us with your Social Security. You own homes, and then you get to sell them for all this money and you're selling them to private equity firms and not to real people. So we'll never be able to own a home.
Right.
And then on the flip side, a parent will try to get involved in their child's love life and give them really good advice, and they reject them. Like when I was in middle school and high school, rarely was a parent ever involved in their child's dating life. Like it just wasn't a thing. I mean, even for myself, I mean, my parents were more involved than others, but it was pretty minimal. And I think that's really something that we've lost, and it's really negative, to not have your parents involved. There's a really viral TikTok a while ago where this like guy basically highlighted the differences in going on your first date. And when they did the 1980s version, right, on the first date, where the boyfriend went to the door with flowers and obviously like saw the parents, and then you saw fast forward to 2024 and he texted here in his car for her to come to the car to meet him, right? So like the family is like completely removed from the whole process.
Parents that any parent would allow that astounds me. I mean, I'm an older parent. I had my child very late in life, but so maybe somebody 20 years younger than me wouldn't do this, but I'm like, oh, no, that's not happening. You need to come to the door and meet me.
Right.
That needs to
that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a bit shocked when I hear stuff like that, because that definitely, would not have happened when I was in high school. That wasn't normal. That's very interesting that they're noticing it, though, that Gen Z is noticing this and making TikToks about it, because like it's like they acknowledge that this is wrong and it should be changed. I think it's hopeful.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm really hopeful for Gen Z men. I mean, obviously they don't have the best role models. We're talking about Andrew Tate, but they're recognizing problems, and they're seeking, to fill the void in I think a positive way generally. So I mean, this is why you're seeing a revitalization in Latin Mass, right? If you go into a traditional church, it's a bunch of young people, like really young families. They're the boomers, unfortunately, are still going to Novus Ordo, right? They're not interested in the tradition. But I think there's a lot of young people who have like had it up to here, to where now we're like, all right, so it's not working. Let's go in a different direction. Obviously, there are a lot of that are lost causes and are doing really poorly and have anxiety, depression, and are committing suicide. But there's a whole other group that are, I think, embracing traditionalism and going back and finding, and this is where we talk about the internet and, is it negative? Is it a positive? The internet is the way that they're finding these things, right? They're not learning it from home. No one's telling them to go to Latin Mass in their home. No one's telling them to, revert to traditionalism at home. They're getting it via the internet, via podcasts and social media.
Yeah, that's real interesting. Latin Mass, I know it's the same thing. We go to a Novus Ordo parish, but we actually do have a Latin Mass available, and it's my son that really likes to go. I mean, I do as well, but the Mass that the parish that we belong to, they're all 70 and over, almost all of them. I mean, there are some. It's a very large parish. There are some young people there. But I didn't hear this specifically from anybody in this parish, but I know I would if I asked them, because over the years, I've heard people in that generation say the same thing. We rejected all of that. It's better now. Why would you want to go back to that? Right. And that can be extended to the wider society and the wider culture. We rejected coming to the door. We just texted. Why would you do that? That was awkward. It was awkward that the men always had to ask the women out and pay for it. It was just unfair. We rejected that, but they just instinctively know. Well, they'll see it, an example of it on YouTube or in an old movie or something, and then they'll instinctively know, hey, that's better. That's better than what we've got now. And I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, and I also, this is where I get like critical of the Catholic Church, because there's a lot of young people, even a lot of young Catholics, who have gone viral on the internet because they're converting to Islam, right? Because Islam is very traditional, and they actually care about and defend their religion in a way that Christians don't. Or you'll see it with the Orthodox Church, right? They have held on to their traditions, the beauty and the mysticism of their services in a way that the Catholic Church has not. Now, of course, there are Latin masses, but they're being repressed and demonized by the Pope of all people. So it's like
investigated by the FBI,
right? And investigated by the, but there's an opportunity for the Catholic Church to have like a Renaissance era, and instead we have a leader of the church. I mean, completely missing the opportunity, and instead demonizing the exact place where the revitalization can happen, which is really frustrating.
Yeah. So this is, now I have on screen some of the images of King Baldwin. and
I love him.
Yeah.
Now.
And the thing is, I think this is, I don't think it's really, I did look at some of the TikToks and say, okay, it's Baldwin the Fourth of Jerusalem. And some of the TikToks do have like the accurate information about him in his reign, but A, it was very short. B, he died at age 24 of leprosy. I think what people are responding to, it's from Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven. I think it's the visuals and the music. It's like the kind of things we were talking about with Dune. That there's that liturgy that you're describing of the beauty and the so the dignity of this. He's not really in a courtly situation since he's in a military context, but it seems to me that one of the things that people value in the character is his, and the mask helps too, right? That silver mask is this sort of dignity that that Edward Norton is giving the character. As much as Kingdom of Heaven drives me nuts.
And mystery, not just dignity, mystery. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's really about the actual Baldwin, because I mean one of the TikToks that I did see was saying, and he founded his kingdom. It's like, yeah, and Saladin captured the city 3 years after he died. So I don't think that's actually it's not really a long-lived legacy there. But the movie creates this mystique of all of these lost virtues that people are responding to.
Well, I think the response to Baldwin is definitely emotional, right? I mean, but I have noticed that like there's some admiration to what he did as an individual, like in a historical perspective. So like something that I've noticed is the fact. So he's gets leprosy at 9. He ascends the throne at 13. At 16, he wins this amazing battle, right, against this Muslim, Kurdish ruler. And he does it as his body is rotting, right? So he's suffering as an individual, and he's in this battle that it's obviously probably very
Montsigard, yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's very dramatized numbers, right? They say they had a few hundred men, and the other guy had like 29,000. But who knows what the real numbers were? But the point is that they were outnumbered, and the legend goes that he was, I mean, just like such a fearless leader despite all the physical pain that he was enduring for his men. And I think the fact that he was so young when he did this, right, 16 years old, I mean, that's the age where so many young men are like just beside themselves in disillusionment, right? Like they're not cool, they can't get the girl, they're not probably very strong, right? You're at that age where you kind of have to make the decision, am I going to be a lifter and an athlete, or am I kind of going to not? And so I think the fact that he was young and the fact that he was suffering so much and he still accomplished so much is so attractive to young men. And then that's on top of the mystique that you were talking about, Professor, like just the way that he's embodied in that film, right? The way that like he has the mask and we don't know much about him, but he's so strong and valiant. And yeah, I just think he's filling in a hero void. And if you're going to have a hero for young men, I think he's a great one. I'm on board.
We're on King Baldwin's side. Well, the movie drives me nuts for lots of reasons, but I always like.
I've never seen it, so
I always like Norton's portrayal of that character. It's incredibly powerful. I think there's something, Norton behind that was in Fight Club, which I think has other layers of sort of challenge. It's interesting scenes. I have a comparison of Norton with I think it's the horse, and therefore it's kin too, right?
Oh, right.
That there is this appeal of, I mean, it goes back to what we were describing about the cities that they're human sized. I think, I mean, another of the beautiful things about Kingdom of Heaven is the horses, the scenes with the horses. I mean,
the pageantry,
the animals. This is true of Baldwin in real life, that even though he had the leprosy, he was able to ride, and that took a lot of doing, right? Because he couldn't use his hand. So he had to control the horse completely with his knees, and that he's able to ride, that he's able to do these physical things, but also with the horse. I mean, that's what in the Barbie movie, when Ken finds out about horses and it's patriarchy, and it's like, yes, that's actually true. I mean, he says that he finds out that it's not, that, you know, when I found out they're not just, horses are not just men extensions, but they actually are. He's right there.
Yeah, well, they give you height and speed, right?
Yes, but
they make you a superior man.
They also give you, it's Dorothy Sayers put it in one of the Peter Wimsey novels, when Harriet sees Peter being able to ride a horse. It's like saying, like, women seeing men, they're, you know, they lose interest in them when they're doing housework, but you see them doing some kind of impressive physical activity. Harriet, who's, you know, resisting Peter's asking her to marry him over and over and over again, sees him riding a horse and, you know, suddenly recognizes he has this godlike power because he could control the animal.
This is amazing. I just thought of the ads I see where these men are doing housework and they're taking care of the babies and the women are at work. And I'm always repulsed by them.
The stay-at-home men, the stay-at-home husbands.
I'm like, oh, ew. So when you said that, when they see a man when a woman sees a man on a horse, it does something for, right, does the opposite of what seeing him, you know, with a vacuum cleaner would do, for sure. Yeah.
I'll just say I think it's both, because when my husband, he worked construction for so long, he'd come home, he's got like dirt all over, and he, you know, like, I know he's had a really hard day. I mean, he's working like, you know, 5 a.m. until, you know, 7 p.m. Like, I mean, it's long days. That's very attractive. That's awesome. It's also very attractive when he unloads the dishwasher, you know, and so I'm here for both of it, you know, but I think when it becomes like all of one thing, when it's like all he does is housework, I think that's where it's like, it's kind of emasculating.
No,
so.
Right. He's the house husband is what's being portrayed in the advertisements. Yeah. I'm laughing so hard because I haven't got a hope that my husband would ever do the dishes.
Well, I'm thinking of the servant work that men and women did, right, in the big houses like Downton Abbey. There's certain kind of butlering and valeting that's appropriate for men versus the housekeeping that's appropriate for women.
Yeah.
Well, horses.
Horses.
That's in the Barbie movie, right? Didn't he say he had like Ken was like, I'm gonna be a horseback rider or whatever?
Yes.
It was like his whole
Oh, he was hilarious. He really was.
Great.
But it you know, in the movie it's funny. It's funny for that because it's actually appropriate and true. That you know, seeing men in Kingdom of Heaven, the battle scenes are you know, a lot of horse charging, and since I think they filmed it in Morocco, right? So it's old style filming of large troops of horses, no CGI, right? I think they were actually all horses, and the feeling of being among life, right? I looked at some clips to remind myself of it and saying, you know, a battle that's about life, that these are not machines fighting, they were animals and men.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a relationship between the men and each other, bonding, and they're bonding.
Right.
With it's well, the opposite of modern life, where everything's disconnected and cold, and machine driven. Oh, there was a train.
And I hear machines.
That was perfect timing.
I hear
it's me. I live near a train. I'm sorry.
It's right on time. How's that? So we've actually talked through our time, which is actually good because I hope we've at least unpacked some things. I had some more pictures from the Culture Critic comparisons where he's talking about, you know, we had these buildings and now they're lost. And it is interesting that the kinds of buildings that he's lamenting, one, these libraries, this is Cincinnati and Detroit, and they tore these libraries down and put parking garages there. The machines took over, right?
Oh, right.
And then the Penn Station, which was a railway depot, right? What is it? Station. It's the rails, and they replaced it with a hideous. I'm not even sure what that is. I always feel like I can never find Penn Station in New York because it's so not there anymore. It's like the railway line is underground in the building, and the building is ugly, and so why would you even notice? But it used to be there was ironically sort of a majesticness to the railroads that somehow these airports kind of have that now.
Yeah, they kind of made them like cathedrals of industry.
Right.
It's like the Brooklyn Bridge was designed to look like that too. And it's about the same era.
So we can't end with the premise that it's the machines as such, because we used to make beautiful buildings for the machines to be in. I hadn't thought of that before. Because railways used to be quite magnificent and Gothic.
To me, it was like they were trying to replace religion with industry, trying to change the society. So they took a European Christian aesthetic and they applied it to the industrial age.
I think my friend, my old colleague John, had he had a conversation. He wrote a book called Pagan America, and I think he kind of answered this question, because when you can appropriate Christianity in the case of like with America and our Constitution, right, and having rights endowed by our Creator, but then and you can do the same thing with creating a beautiful railroad station. But when you don't have the actual underpinning faith in that religion, replenishing the people, then you ultimately lose everything that all the positives that come from Christianity, right? The beautiful architecture, or even the equal in our society, right? All the amendments in our Constitution, right, are being disrespected and trampled on because we were a society meant to be made up of Christians. Well, when it's inherently doesn't replenish itself when you don't have a Christian society. So therefore, all these things start to fall apart. Even if you try to sort of mimic them, it doesn't work unless there's authentic belief, authentic faith.
Right, which is what I think both John Adams and Benjamin Franklin had commented on, that this Constitution was for a religious and moral people only, and it's not fit for any other kind.
I like the way Evita is saying it, though, because there's more. We need to have you back. And we start with the easy stuff like men and women. No, because I mean what you're describing is also the problem of marriage now. It's saying that marriage is not it can't just be the contract that Olympia de Gouges imagined in her Declaration of the Rights of Women, and it can't just be an industrial compact or a labor. It needs to be the sacrament of our relationship with each other, right. And that the more laws that we try to make to like force people to behave in certain ways, there's no substance there. It's like trying to make the buildings without, as you were very nicely saying, the soul. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The next comparison I had was a bank. So it's apparently Buffalo Bank and Erie County Savings Bank in Buffalo, and it's been replaced by a high rise. It used to look more like a castle, but this is a good theme to be continued on over and over and over again, replacing these. The structures had that character in the past, but now they've been revealed to be substanceless.
The shock to the system, right? The architectural changes.
And I think that we didn't really talk about the person who was critiquing Culture Critic, but it's this left-wing professor, and he basically said that highlighting picture is actually secretly white supremacist, because somehow beautiful architecture is white culture, which is stupid, because Culture Critic has talked about Hindu architecture and Islamic architecture and ancient Egyptian architecture. His real critique is that whether it's Christianity or another religion, of course, I have a preference to Christianity. I am a Christian, but when you are thinking about higher powers, when you're orienting yourself with religion, your buildings will reflect that higher that higher mentality, right? They'll reflect, like Fulton Brown said, the soul or heaven, but when you start to lose it, you lose all of the spark and the beauty that comes with it. So that's why, obviously, like Islamic, that's not Christian, but they're still thinking about the metaphysical concepts, and they're still, orienting themselves to something beyond just the mundane. And so that's reflected in their buildings, which are objectively beautiful. And then when you lose that concept of objective beauty, and you start to say everything is relative, and of course things are going to be ugly. And that's why the guy who wrote that critique of Culture Critic was really mad. It's not because it was racist. It was because he was seeing his ideology under attack, and he didn't want to engage with Culture Critic and say, no, this is why modernism and leftism is actually a good thing. Instead, he reverted to basically being a crybaby and whining about racism, which of course is a cop out.
No, your comment, Tim, was brilliant. I read it.
Yeah,
it's very good. It's perfect.
But it is his. I mean, he's. I do want to carry on this. We're gonna have you back, right? But
okay.
No, because I feel like we've been unpacking a lot of things that can still be thought through better. Because Christians, we're right. It's not just like we prefer it. And
right, that's true.
And just like you're saying with the Latin Mass, we as Christians need to get better explaining what we're right about. Right. It's the one thing that modernity has made all too easy. Well, it's not easy. It's frustrating because, if you're going to be a nice Christian, you're not going to challenge other people on their belief. It's like, why not? It's like, you have an understanding of our role.
Aren't you supposed to?
Well, right. We talked about this in Tolkien, right? It's like our understanding of ourselves as creatures in a creation made to subcreate. Explain that, and then we make beautiful buildings, because we're expressing our being made in the image and likeness of beauty. And the game that guy's playing with the white supremacy and dog whistles and such like that, it's unfair fighting, as it were, because people, he knows that Westerners are unwilling to articulate their fundamental beliefs well. And so it's like, yeah.
Or he's trying to make them afraid to.
And they've been made afraid to by this, you're bad if you claim that you're right. And it's like, no.
He's claiming he's right, though. But he's not bad because he's being right about bad people. And, and you're supposed to think they're bad too. It's the whole argument, non-argument falls apart, as Evita pointed out to him.
Yeah, but this only works in the permanent kindergarten, right? Don't be nasty to each other. You got to play nicely together. It's like that's not
doing it.
Well, no, it's we need to, as a culture of worship of Jesus Christ our Lord, be able better to articulate why we worship Jesus Christ our Lord. And it's that particular failing is the worst effect of this feminization, right? Because women do not like direct conflict.
And I think that's why he's attacking, because I think white supremacy is a stand-in for Christianity.
Yes,
that's what's being under attack right now. Anything Christian or anything Christian culture produced, like the library, is going to be attacked. But they won't come right out and say Christianity. Like Rabbi Barclay saying, Christ is king and can be racist, or was it or anti-Semitic? I think he said.
Let's not do him again. We
No, not going to. But he's just saying the quiet. So this guy, the guy who's attacking Culture Critic, he's just saying the quiet part out loud, right?
Right, but the quiet part that we need to be able to say is men are great and Christ is king. No.
Right. These buildings say
the positive things about virtue and truth And I mean, the beauty, the beautiful, the true, and the good. And I do say that Christians have not, as a group, been particularly robust about that over the last generation or so. Yeah.
Which is why people are attracted to Islam, unfortunately, or the Orthodox Church.
Right, because they're confident in their own claims of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so we got to what men really want. Horses. Ken's holding his horses book. Chivalry, which is that's the Elizabeth movie, right? Because we're trying to understand the La Volta, the sexy dances they did in Elizabethan times, because we need it for the pictures for Draco Alchemicus right now. But whatever his name in the finds in the movie, right? It's like we want courtesy and graciousness, and I do think men want that too. They like the idea of serving women for beauty and well, okay, sex, right? But make it a little harder for them, girls. Say no until they ask you to marry them.
Not just that, though. I think they want to be appreciated.
Yes,
I think that's why they make those gestures. It's not just for sex.
Right. I think so. It's so.
And I think men, well, men treat women differently depending on like the expectations that they have for them. I think you're right. Like make them work for it. Like you have to, give them clear expectations. Like I think my mom always said that my dad didn't always carry her whatever she was holding immediately, like her luggage or whatever. Like she made it an expectation, like, are you going to grab that? And then of course he does, like you have to teach them how to, teach people how to treat you. And I think a lot of women weren't raised to do that properly by their own dads. And so they're not, doing it properly. And they wonder why is he treating me well? And it's like, well, you're not giving him the right expectations, or you're not attracting the right type of man who's going to do that for you.
He doesn't know what well, and so you should tell him, right?
Yes. And as I'm showing here, they want beautiful architecture.
Yes.
So I mean, we've done the episode. I've still enjoyed the episode we did about this time last year, right? When it's like, what do women want? What do men want? And we read nothing but the love poetry they wrote for women.
I remember that. Yeah.
Apparently, men are quite romantic.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Tolkien said? He are much more romantic than women.
And he's right. I still stand by it. He's absolutely right in that letter. Women want to have babies. He's totally right on that. Tolkien was never wrong. He's very perceptive. And men, both, the mutual respect of the sexes is what's sadly been turned into this vicious game of, oh, I'll do it myself. It's like, no, you're going to change that light bulb for me. Thank you very much. Men change light bulbs. That's in my the women in my family know this rule.
And kill the bugs. Yes.
Okay. Well, they definitely change light bulbs. Anyway, putting us in the Industrial Revolution time was like when the electric light has created this situation. Any last words of thought now that we've rambled through the complexity of modern life?
Anything, but I'm so glad to have joined you guys, and it was so much fun. Really late, but it's fun.
Yes, we do go late in the Mosaic Ark. Thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope you come back and that we can keep working on these questions, because
I would love to.
It'll be great. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, we got a super chat. Yang ZG, thank you all for a great stream. Thank you for joining us. And Jack says a skateboard may be the modern equivalent to a horse. I think you're right. I live by Clueless, and the skateboardy guy says something to the effect of, men need to ride the skateboards because what will they do to impress the women otherwise? So
that's true. Fulton Broad, you are just the most, I don't know, culturally in tune person over 50 I've ever met in my life. It's crazy.
Well, I have great students. It's to keep me young, right? Thank you. Thank you. It's been so much fun, Evita, and I hope we get to have you back with more questions and architecture for sure.
Awesome.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Night.